Thanks for sticking with me. I know the past couple topics have been very complicated. So now we're going to try to pull it all together. I want to review with you some buying tips to keep in mind and things to remember when it comes to making those decisions. Remember, as I said earlier, there's nothing that's the best. It's what's best for you. So as I review some of these items, you need to keep that point of reference in mind. Does this seem like it's going to be what I'm looking for? First of all, Medigap or Medicare supplement plans. Medigap premiums can vary based upon your age, gender, and tobacco usage, and the rates tend to go up annually. It's important for you to evaluate the carriers to make sure that you find a carrier that shows a history of stable increases over time. There are times when carriers enter the marketplace and they price their premiums very low to try to grab market share, in my opinion, only to increase rates rapidly once they have you signed up. I mentioned earlier as well, there's a variety of Medicare supplement or Medigap policies and plans available out there. They have to be uniform across all carriers according to Medicare rules. However, they all have different premiums depending upon the coverage that they provide. One in particular, Plan G, tends to be the most popular. And the reason that is it tends to pick up everything that Medicare doesn't cover after the deductible is paid for Part B. So you would pay your $198 Part B deductible, and then Part G, generally speaking, picks up all the other Medicare approved expenses. Important note, Medigap or Medicare supplement plans are guaranteed issue only when you enter Medicare for the first time, your initial election period. Later on, if you decide to try to get into a Medicare supplement or Medigap plan, you can, but the odds are that you're going to be subject to medical underwriting. So the certainty doesn't exist any longer. And that varies by carrier. It's private insurance, so their underwriting guidelines are going to be different and unique to each carrier. That is unless you have a qualifying event occur, such as leaving your employer coverage. Part D, prescription drugs. Some reminders about that. Once again, you have to get a plan and you can purchase it as a standalone drug plan. And the options 1 and 2 that I reviewed earlier, if you're on original Medicare or with a Medicare with a supplement plan, you can buy a standalone drug plan to complement those. Or with Medicare Advantage plans, oftentimes the prescription coverage is built into it. That was option 3. If you do not get a prescription drug plan, you will be subject to a late enrollment penalty. There is a program called Extra Help or low-income subsidy for those low-income earners to get help with their premiums and their co-pays and deductibles. I introduced in the previous segment the concept of a formulary. I'm going to take that just a little bit further now and also make an example, as this could be oftentimes the single most important criteria that causes people to decide upon one plan or the other. I mentioned earlier the formulary, the list of drugs. What happens is the drug companies, or the insurance companies I should say, they take their formulary and they start to stratify it every year. And they call that stratification tiers, T-I-E-R-S. Not T-E-A-R-S, although it might drive you to that, but it's T-I-E-R-S. There's typically 5 tiers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, numbered as such. They group the drugs, generally speaking, according to cost. So your lower cost generic drugs, for example, are going to be categorized as a tier 1. Tier 2 will be a generic drug, generally speaking, that hasn't been as generic as long. Tier 3s are preferred drugs, and so on and so forth. And as you can imagine, the cost gets more expensive to you as you go from a tier 1 to a tier 5. Every carrier has a different formulary. Every carrier puts their drugs into tiers differently, and every year that can change. The impact of one drug change on you from a tier 2 to a tier 3 could be very significant. And let me give you an example of the point I'm trying to make. I was dealing with a client in a county here in North Carolina, and in that county there were only 3 main carriers to choose from. She was on a drug. That drug was carried as a tier 2 for one carrier, a tier 3 for the second carrier, and the third carrier did not cover it at all. So in other words, it wasn't on their formulary. The projected annualized cost for that person, for that one drug, for carrier number 1 that had it as a tier 2 was about $700 to $800. For the second carrier that had it as a tier 3 was about $1,700. And for the third carrier that didn't have it on their formulary and thus didn't cover it, the annual cost was projected to be over $7,000. So in this person's case, no matter what the other plan dynamics were, she went with plan 1 because nothing else was knowingly going to have as significant of a financial impact on her as that one single drug. Keep in mind, it changes every year by every carrier. It's extremely important for you to shop your drugs each and every year to make sure you're making the best financial decision for yourself. Many insurers have relationships with the drug companies, or the pharmacies I should say, and they have a network of pharmacies where you can receive a discounted rate, but they also have what's called preferred pharmacies within that network that at times you can get even a greater discount. And many of them also offer mail order, which oftentimes you can get many generic drugs at no cost for a 90-day supply. So evaluating those criteria is important as well. You are allowed to change your drug plans every year during the annual enrollment period, which I'll speak to in a few moments. That's why I tell you to shop around, because you have the right to change it. So you should find the one that's best for you for the upcoming year and consider that, all other things being equal. A little more about Medicare Advantage plans in summary. They vary by county. Every Medicare Advantage plan has to be approved at the county level within a given state. And once again, it can vary every year. You will find an insurer in one county one year and then maybe not the next, and vice versa. Make sure you understand if it's a HMO or a PPO. All Medicare Advantage plans are going to be HMOs or PPOs, with one minor exception, and that's called the Medicare Savings Plan. That is a high deductible plan which allows you to see any doctor that accepts Medicare patients. Make sure you understand how the drugs are covered. Just like I mentioned with the Part D earlier, you are going to want to understand how that works in your Medicare Advantage plan if the drugs are bundled into that plan, which is quite likely. One other thing I mentioned earlier that I need to highlight and really expand upon here is Medicare Advantage plans, out of the 3 options, is the only one that has extra benefits, generally speaking, in them, such as gym memberships at no cost, over-the-counter benefits, vision, dental, hearing, transportation benefits to go to your doctor for appointments, etc. Those things can be very significant to you. So it's important to look at these extra benefits through the lens of real money versus monopoly money. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's take an example. Let's say that I am currently a member of a gym and I'm paying $50 a month to go to that gym. If all of a sudden I could get access to that gym, same gym, and not pay that $50, that's $600 of real money that I just saved because I was spending it and I no longer am. Let's look at the other side of the coin, however. What if I am one of these wishful thinking gym goers and I keep saying I'm going to go and saying I'm going to go, but for some reason I never seem to make it there? Well, if that's the case, that $600 hypothetical really doesn't mean anything to you. You're not going to save anything because you're not spending anything, okay? So that's the monopoly money lens. So don't be lulled into these things unless you're really going to experience the savings. Remember, you can change these plans every year. So let's use another example that I've had come up a few times, and that is the area of hearing aids. Hearing aids can be very expensive, into the thousands and thousands of dollars. The degree of hearing aid benefit varies greatly from one plan to the other, from one carrier to the other. So if my doctor tells me that I'm going to need hearing aids in the near future, and I have annual enrollment coming up, I may want to look closer at the hearing aid benefit. And hypothetically, if it's going to save me thousands of dollars, I may move to that plan just to enjoy that benefit for the upcoming year. Again, it's important to make sure that your doctors are in network, et cetera, or you're willing to find a new one if it isn't, et cetera. But those are just two examples of how to evaluate these extra benefits and how they might apply to you. The rates for the Medicare Advantage plan, unlike the supplement plans, are the same for everybody. So if you're in a Medicare Advantage plan and you just entered Medicare at age 65, someone who's 85 is going to pay the same rate as you at 65 for the same plan. They do not change according to your age or gender or tobacco usage. Okay? You are allowed to change these every year once again. So I cannot reinforce enough, shop around. When you get on original Medicare and you select a plan, you are going to receive what's called an annual notice of change. It looks something like this about late September. I caution you that that is a very high-level summary of the current plan you're on and the changes to it for the upcoming year. One thing that it does not go into great detail on, for example, is drug changes. So you are not going to understand how the drug changes are going to impact you as a result of reviewing your summary of changes. You're going to have to dig further. And obviously we would like to help you dig further if you so choose. So those are the key things to remember and buying tips for the 3 different options that we mentioned.